morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. I got a great show today. We're going to kick it off here in just a second with head baseball coach for the Florida Gators, Kevin O'Sullivan. Second portion of the program will be joined by Bob Redman, talk some Gator football recruiting. But let's go straight to the Titan MR hotline, and we're joined by the head baseball coach, Kevin O'Sullivan. Good morning, Kevin. How are you?
Good, Shane. Good to see you. We're here.
So, Coach, before we get into what's going on now and this past year, I want to go back. You graduated from Jupiter High School down in South Florida. Were you strictly a baseball guy, or did you play multiple sports growing up?
No, I was a three-sport athlete. I played, obviously, baseball all 4 years, played football all 4 years, and wrestled as well. So,
okay.
Back then, the 2 or 3 sport athlete was the norm, and that's certainly something I promote as well right now.
What position did you play in football?
Okay, so we ran the wishbone. I was the smallest lineman, so I was a pulling guard and played linebacker. But back then, when you were 175 pounds, you were kind of big. But it's not like that anymore.
No doubt at all. The wishbone, that's awful football.
I know. But at least I had a lot of action.
Throw about 2 passes a game.
2 passes a game. My best friend was a quarterback, and he used to always. I used to give him heck all the time that he was the worst athlete on the field because we ran the wishbone.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, Coach, obviously you were a very good baseball player. You ended up playing junior college ball, and then you went and played for the Virginia Cavaliers. Talk a little bit about your career as a catcher for Virginia.
Well, to be honest with you, Shane, I had a few options to go to stay in state of Florida, but I went to Virginia because I was going to be I was pre-med, and that was the path I was planning to take. And then when I graduated, obviously my path took a different route. Got involved with some people, one in particular named Bob Shaw, that kind of got me into the coaching ranks in American Legion, and my path just took a different route. So, but the original reason I went to Virginia was because I wanted to do pre-med. Gotcha.
So obviously when you left Virginia, did you play any level of pro ball? It's so difficult to make it into major leagues. And that's every kid's dream, is to play professionally. Did you have dreams of playing, or did you realize that at some point, look, I'm going to be a really good college player, and then I got to take a different path?
Well, I think that's a really good question, Shane. Originally, every kid thinks they have an opportunity to play at the next level. I think I was always realistic in my abilities to where I may have not had the physical abilities to play at the major league level, but I certainly, had a dream to play at the minor league level. And once those dreams did not happen in the draft, I immediately switched gears, and I think that's what's got me into coaching at an early age, that, I was pretty realistic on my abilities.
So you coached for a while, and then you were a longtime assistant at Clemson, which is a very good college baseball program. And then Jeremy Foley comes to you after they decide to let Pat McMahon go. Were you surprised that a program like the University of Florida was going to go after a guy who had always been an assistant? Because, nowadays in the coaching search, regardless of what sport it is, it's like he has no head coaching experience. I don't agree with that, because you have to get head coaching experience at some point in your career to be a head coach. So anyway, talk a little bit about the process of how that happened, how you became the coach here at Florida.
That's a good question. So I started out in junior college at FCCJ, went back there and coached there for a year. Then I went to FAU, got my master's, and coached there for 2 years. Went back to UVA, coached there for 2 years. Then I went down to Fort Myers and was coaching with the Minnesota Twins in their rookie league GCL club for 2 years. Then I went to Clemson, like you said, for 9. So we were playing in the Super Regional in Starkville against Mississippi State, and obviously there was a coach. The opening came up with Pat being let go, and then so I sent my resume in, and I'll never forget. Jeremy called me. We drove back from Starkville, lost both games in the Super Regional, and Jeremy called me about 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday and said, "Hey, we're interested in you. We want you to come down." And of course, I called a couple of my buddies and thought it was a prank call. And they obviously said it wasn't. And then he told me Chip was going to call me at 6 o'clock. So Chip called me at 6. I flew down on Wednesday. I was supposed to fly down on Tuesday. but there were some storms. So I told them I would drive down. They said, no, just hold off. So the plane came and got me on Wednesday, and me and Chip were in probably like a 6-seater, and landed, and we kind of did the tour where I would meet Ann Hughes, the academic advisor. I would meet the strength coach, the trainer, and then we were going to the swamp to have some lunch. And after we got done with lunch, he's like, Jeremy wants to kind of meet with you, and before we continue the itinerary. So we got back in Chip's car, drove across the street, went to Jeremy's office, and he asked me 2 questions, and we sat down, and he stood up and said, congrats, you're the next head coach of Florida. It literally happened just like that. And I was floored. And there was never negotiations. There was nothing about contract. I just wanted the job. And 2 girls walked in. They have Gator gear. They drop it down. And I'm getting ready to do the press conference the next day. And then I kind of stopped Jeremy halfway through. And I'm like, there's one thing. I've got a golden retriever at home back at Clemson. I got to get him somebody to watch the dog. And he laughed his tail off, and he goes, you know what? If you'd have told me you had a golden retriever, because you know how much Jeremy loves dogs, he said I would have hired you at 8 a.m. this morning. So it was a really good story, but literally I flew back to Clemson that night, got the dog boarded, packed some clothes, flew back to Gainesville next morning, did the press conference, early afternoon, and I was on a plane to Cincinnati later that afternoon to go recruiting, and that's how it happened.
Wow, that's a great story. Speaking of recruiting, okay, so let everybody know, a lot of our listeners understand how baseball works, how many scholarships. It's not like football where you have 85 scholarships. They're all full rides. Baseball, you have to distribute it among several different kids. How hard is that when it comes to trying to put your team together?
Well, the hard part is not to get them to come to Florida. The hard part is figuring out how the scholarships work with the draft, because you just don't know. Like, for example, this year, obviously the draft changed this year. We went from 40 rounds to 5 rounds. And Tommy Mace calls me Thursday morning. They're going to do the rounds 2 through 5. So the night before they did the first round, he did not get selected, obviously. So he calls me, he tells me what his number is, and he's like, Sully, if I don't get this number, I'm coming back to school. So now all of a sudden I'm getting back Tommy Mace, which I don't expect. I'm getting back Jack Leff, which I don't expect. I've got a bunch of juniors that are going to come back to school. And the incoming class, we only lose 2 guys. So we're sitting here trying to navigate through how we're going to have the 11.7, which is what we're allowed to have, basically, just a little bit over 11 and a half scholarships to divide amongst 27 players. And it's a really difficult thing to handle. This year was probably the most difficult season, obviously, that we had to handle that. But obviously our roster is going to be really talented, but there's obviously a really tough decisions that we needed to make over the last couple of weeks or so.
So, I mean, obviously the NCAA made a rule this year with the COVID and everything. Your seniors had an opportunity to come back if they chose. And I'm not even sure all the rules, how many kids you can have on your roster now. But isn't that going to be difficult with your incoming freshmen, how to manage all that?
Well, I think for a lot of programs, yes. For us, probably no, because Austin Langworthy, I think he's going to end up signing. I've only got 2 seniors coming back. And I think the positive thing with a school like Florida is most of our juniors and seniors, they sign professionally. So we always have a young roster. So for us, it's not going to affect us that much. But there are more juniors on our roster coming back than we normally would have. And there's more incoming guys coming than we would normally have. But at the end of the day, like I said, we've had to make some really tough decisions and kind of make some tough phone calls, but it's all worked out, and the roster's just going to be fine.
Well, I'm curious, Sully, when it comes to recruiting, because we're one of the top baseball programs in the country. There's no question about it. So you're bringing in top-notch players who have an opportunity to leave right out of high school and make good money playing professionally. So when you're during the recruiting process, you got player X who is, possibly going to be a first-round pick out of high school, and you got player B over here. do you kind of just wait till the draft? I mean, how do you handle it when you've already said, okay, we want both of these guys, or if this guy goes pro, we want to add this other guy. How do you handle it? Because there's no other really sport that has to do that.
Yeah, I think it's a choice of how you want to recruit. And I think earlier in my career, I was a little bit more conservative in terms of taking the player that I thought would get to school. But at the end of the day, I've gotten to a point now where I'm just signing the best player. And, they all can't sign pro. And the bottom line is I think we've gotten to a point where we have proven over the last, this is going to be my 14th year, that we've proven that we can develop players here, and players do make more money or do better in the draft. So we have a little bit more of a resume to prove to the kids that they can turn down X amount of dollars. And for the most part, it works out for most of the kids.
Yeah, it's so much different than football. But so let's talk about, okay, you got a new facility. You've heard, and I've been preaching for years, Florida needed a football standalone facility because of recruiting. McKeithen Stadium is a decent stadium. It's nothing like what LSU. It's not Duty Noble at Mississippi State. It's not what Arkansas has. You now have a new ballpark. However, did that ever hurt you in recruiting, or does it really not matter in baseball because the best players want to play at the best for the best teams?
Well, I think you answered the question yourself, and people have asked me that over and over the years. We've had top 3 or 4 recruiting classes every single year, and I never use the facility as an excuse not to get good players. The bottom line is this: players, really good players, they want to win. They want to get to Omaha. They want to play, in the great bowl games in football and go to the Final Four and the Elite Eight in basketball. That's what the really good players want. And if you're going to pick a school, in our league that has better facilities, and you're not going to look at the most important things as far as development and winning, then you're not the right player for us. And that's always been my story and my sales pitch to these players. And now, obviously, we have a great facility with the new stadium, but I don't think that's going to help us in recruiting. We've always done good in recruiting. Right. But what I do think it's going to help with, I think it's going to help kids turn down a significant amount of money to come to Florida because they're playing in the AA and AAA ballpark, and one of, if not the nicest ballparks in the country.
We're speaking with Kevin O'Sullivan here on the Titan MR Hotline. So, Coach, talk a little bit about that new ballpark. We've seen pictures of it. How would you rank it? My daughter graduated from Mississippi State, and I'm a Mississippi guy, so I've been to a lot of baseball games at Duty Noble, which I think personally it's the best atmosphere in college baseball. LSU has a tremendous facility, as I mentioned. How is ours going to rank compared to the top ones in the country?
I would say it's going to be right there with the 2 schools you mentioned. And, I just went through there yesterday, and, it seems like I'm doing tours, it seems like every other day, with people that want to, come by and see the stadium. And I've been to, Mississippi State, obviously, over the years. I've been to LSU. I've been to Arkansas. I've been to all the great stadiums. This might not be the biggest, but I can assure you that this is going to be the nicest. And from a fan standpoint and from an amenity standpoint with the players, I can't see another stadium being nicer than this one. And I'm being honest. And I know I'm biased, and I'm obviously I'm going to feel that way, but I honestly feel that way.
Good deal. Coach, let's talk about it. In 2017, you win the first school's national title. Talk a little bit about that team and how it was so great to finally, I don't want to say get the monkey off our back, but Florida had many opportunities, but it finally came through in 2017.
Well, I think that's fair to say. I don't think anybody was more frustrated, up until 2017 than me. I mean, we went to 10, 11, and 12, and then obviously 14, 15, 16. And at some point you start scratching your head and you're like, what do I need to do different? So that was a really interesting year for a lot of reasons. We were not very good in the midweek games because we didn't have very good pitching depth. Michael Burns ended up being our closer side. He saved 19 games and didn't have I don't think he had his second save till like March 28th against Florida State that year. So we played 6 weeks until he had his second save. We had a lot of moving parts. Offensively, we quite didn't hit our, hit our stride till probably 2/3 of the way through the year. But when you look at it, we won the SEC regular season. We obviously had a great tournament in Hoover, and we ended up winning it. But the thing was this: I think the biggest separator in that year, obviously, the draft always happens 2 weeks before Omaha, or a week before Omaha, and a lot of times these kids get drafted, and they're looking at $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million, or worried about think about their future. But Alex Faedo somehow figured out a way to kind of stay focused, and he kind of led the charge. So obviously he pitched in Omaha twice, beat TCU twice, 3-0, 3-0, and gave us a chance right out of the gate to win the first couple games. And then we had a couple guys step up, obviously like Brady Singer and obviously Jackson Coer at the end, in the championship game, and Tyler Dyson, the way he pitched the championship game. And we just had a lot of different guys contribute. And I'll give you a funny story. So we win game 1, 4-3 against LSU. We drive the bus to the stadium. I got my kids with me. We get off the bus. Everybody's going to the holding room. And Jackson Coer comes up to me as we're walking through the hallway. And he goes, "Hey, Sully, if you need me to close out the game tonight, I'm ready to go." And I'm like, I never even thought about it, Shane. Never thought 1 second about him closing out the game because he was our game 3 starter.
Right.
So I'm sitting in BP, and I'm talking to both assistants, and we basically come up with the decision: if we have a 2-run lead or more, we're going to use Jackson Coer in 7th, 8th, and 9th. And I was going to use Michael Byrne before that because he was tired. So sure enough, we got a 1-run lead. It's 2-1. So it wasn't clear cut. So I remember getting to the top step, and Michael was tired. He was done. And I said, "You know what? We've been out here so many times. We fell short. We're going to roll the dice." So I went out to the mound, brought in Jackson, who had not come out of the bullpen the entire year. He was a starter, and I could just remember him running from the bullpen into the obviously to the mound, and I could feel his adrenaline, his energy, and his heart was pounding through his chest. And I remember asking him, "Are you okay?" And he goes, "Yeah, I think so." I said, "Well, that's encouraging." And I tapped him on the rear end, and I walked back to the dugout, and his first warm-up pitch was 97. So I said, "I think we're all right." And then the rest is history.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's good stuff. So let me ask you this, because you've had so many good teams here at Florida that, in 17 won the national title. Who would you say is your best team that you've had? What year?
2017.
Okay.
Because they won it. I get asked that all the time. We may have had better teams as far as depth. Like in 2016, that was probably in 2012, we were really good too, obviously. But 16, we did not lose a midweek game, I don't think. But when it comes right down to it, Shane, when you play a weekend series against LSU, it's 2 out of 3. When you play a regional, you win 3 in a row, you're moving on. When you play a super regional, it's 2 out of 3. If you go to Omaha and you win the first 2, somebody's got to beat you twice. So it's not always about the pitching depth, it's with the front end pitching. And I think that's what I learned out of 17 is like, it's great to have, to be 10, 11, 12 deep on the mound. But at the end of the day, it comes down to your top 4 or 5 guys. And if they perform at the end of the year, you have a chance.
I've always wanted
to
ask
what they did in 17.
Yeah, I've always wanted to ask you this. Have you ever let your pitchers or catchers call the game at, a midweek game or anything, or has it always been the coaching staff calling pitches?
No. Okay. So Mike Zunino did in 11 and 12 because I trusted him. Mike Rivera did it as well in 17 because I trusted him.
Okay.
It really comes down to the experience that you have on the mound and what you have behind the plate.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? If you got a really young club and you got, 2 of your top 3 starters are freshmen and sophomores, and you have a freshman or sophomore behind the plate, they're not ready for that. But once they get to be juniors and, they're a little bit older and they've been through, a little bit of the, rigors of the SEC, then it gets to be a little bit easier to trust them a little bit more.
The new ballpark, what are the dimensions out there? Is this going to be like a pitcher's ballpark or a hitter's ballpark?
I'm going to say it's similar to what McKeithen is. It's 330 down each line.
Okay.
And it stays shallow, and then it jets back out like pretty quickly to the alleys. It's 380 in both alleys, I think, and 400 center. So I think the way it's going to play, at least by dimensions, from the gaps to the lines, it'll be hitter friendly.
Mm-hmm.
From the gaps to center field, it should be pitcher friendly.
Gotcha. Let's talk real quick about your team this year. Obviously, you had a tremendous start, and then lose your first game to the semis, the last game that's ever going to be played at McKeithen Stadium. Just talk about, I mean, yeah, it's hard to determine how that team was going to progress because you were just now, I think I want to say y'all stopped right before SEC play started against Georgia, right?
Yes.
What did you think this team could do this year?
It's a really good question. You know, going into the season, I didn't know what to expect because we were coming off, you know, obviously 2019 where we struggled. So as we came into the season, we started winning, win again. We go down to Miami, sweep Miami. It was 1-2. And I started thinking, like, we have a real chance here. And it wasn't because of the ability was good, because we were obviously talented enough. But it was the adjustments and the improvements that a bunch of these freshman pitchers had made from year 1 to year 2. Ben Speck being one, you know, obviously, you know, with Tommy and Jack making improvements, and Hunter Barco just starting to figure some things out. And I'm like, you know, we have enough. And I thought this was one of our better offensive teams that we've had. And like I said, when we went down to Miami and beat them 3 really close games, I was like, you know what? We got a chance. And obviously when we played Florida State, that game was a little bit difficult. I remember driving home thinking, okay, you know, we're 16-0. We lost 1 game. It's not, you know, in the baseball world, that's not the biggest deal. But when you lose to Florida State, it's always a big deal, or anybody your rival. So the issue that we had was we faced, you know, a relatively soft tossing lefty that we couldn't prepare for. We hadn't seen any of those guys in the first 16 games for the most part. And on our staff, we were very limited on those types of looks. So we faced a guy at Florida State that had given us a different look that we weren't prepared for. So, you know, I talked to the staff the next day, and I'm like, you know, whatever it takes, we need to have 4 or 5 lefties on our staff so we can be prepared for this, you know, this type of thing doesn't happen again. But all in all, to answer your question originally, I thought we had a chance. You know, I thought we had a chance. I did. I didn't know that going in, like I said, but I think after we had gone through the first 10, 12 games, I'm like, I don't know. This could get really interesting.
Well, you got a lot of guys coming back, as you mentioned. You got a lot of really good players coming in. Who are some of the youngsters that the Gator Nation should look out for next year that can make a huge contribution to your ball club?
Well, I was just talking to Tom Holliday. So a lot of our players are off playing summer ball right now, either in Florida or South Florida, or we've got 3 or 4 players out in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But Brandon Scroat hit 100. His first pitch the other day in inter-squad was 101.
Oh.
Second pitch was 100. So I talked to him this morning. We got Hunter Barco out there as well with Nathan Hickey. You know, as far as the incoming guys, I mean, you know, we got, you know, Josh Rivera coming back. We got Acton coming back, Galileo, Judd Fabian, of course, he's going to be a first rounder. You know, Jacob Young's going to be play left. I mean, we got everybody back. So it's really going to be about managing, you know, relationships and personalities and expectations. And if we can handle the locker room, I mean, we'll be as talented as anybody in the country come next February.
Last thing for you, Sully, you know, with McKeithen being torn down, what's probably the one best memory that stands out for you that happened in that ballpark?
Okay, there's 2. I've been asked that a lot, Shane. So the first one is when we finally beat Miami in 2010 to go to the World Series. Because that had always been, you know, you talk about the monkey on the back. Miami had always had Florida's number. And when we beat them, it was a huge, huge sense of relief. The second one, obviously, is Langworthy's home run against Auburn. I mean, I don't think you can ever replicate a situation like that where a kid hits a home run the ball bounces off the right fielder's glove, and it's extra innings. It's a walk off. I think for that kid being a local kid, obviously from Williston, and him being able to have that situation, and him be able to come through in that deal, and always being a Gator, that's gonna be hard to beat.
Yeah, I agree. That's the one that stands out in my mind. So who's going to be the first guy to throw out the first pitch in the new ballpark?
That's a good question. We talk about that all the time. You know what? I'm gonna take the easy route and say Scott Strickland. Him and Jeremy both. I think they both throw out first pitch. Two guys.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Well, Sully, hey man, I know it's tough times right now, the crazy times we're going through, but I appreciate you taking the time to join us on this Monday morning. Stay safe, my friend, and hopefully we'll be playing in that new ballpark this year.
We will, Shane. Well, always a pleasure. Anytime, buddy.
All right, that's Kevin O'Sullivan. Join us on the Titan MR hotline. Hey, folks, at Center State Bank, we put business first. We're the largest community bank in the state of Florida. Center State has 5 convenient Alachua County locations to serve you better. Come in and experience the Center State difference. To learn more, visit centerstatebank.com. Center State Bank, member FDIC. We're going to take our first time out of the program. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Hollywood Bob Redman, talking some Gator recruiting. You're watching and listening to Pot Up with Matthews in the Morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. We'll be right back.
Time out! Time out! Hey! Time out! Time out! Time out! There we go. Good.
We want to take this moment to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills.
Let's give them something to cheer for now.
Our gridiron sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Titan MRI, Gainesville's only locally owned and operated MRI facility. The Best Restoration, Masters of Disasters. Meldon Law, where you matter most. Peachland Dental, Gator fans' first choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte. Our touchdown sponsors are Campus USA Credit Union, Celebration Point Town Center, The Digital Mortgage Guy, Adams Ribs, Gator Dominoes, Celebrate Primary Care, Center State Bank, Gator Bait Media, Davis Gainesville Chevrolet, Miapa Latin Cafe, Gators Dockside, Aikido America Martial Arts and After School,
Doreen Weeby Realtor, Caldwell Banker MM Parish,
Radware, Wrap Spot,
and Style Cuts.
If you are interested in promoting your business on this show, you can visit our website, potupwithshane.com, and click on the Advertise button or call Freddie at 352-284-3733. Again, thank you for all the great businesses that support the show. Please remember, if you like what we are doing here, thank our sponsors and support the businesses that support us.
He's looking, still looking. He's going for the end zone. He's got a touchdown!
Welcome back to Pot Up with Matthews in the Morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. Large enough to serve you, small enough to care. It's a Monday edition. I want to thank Coach Kevin O'Sullivan for joining us. Now we're going to go back to the Titan MR line. We're going to be joined by Hollywood Bob Redman. But first, folks, Celebration Point, or where the Gators go to celebrate. With premium brands like Bass Pro Shop, Tommy Hilfiger, Hotel Indigo, Nike, Medici's, Regal Cinemas, and coming soon, the HBC's new restaurant, Spurrier's Gridiron Grill, and Visor's Rooftop Bar. We will see you at Celebration Point, where the Gators come to celebrate. Now we're going to be joined by Bob Redman from Swamp 24/7 Sports. Good morning, Bob. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well,
Hanging in there?
I am doing that. Got 3 kids at home, been home since March, so that's been a little rough, but we're getting through it and finally getting out a little bit now that everything's starting to pick back up again. So, we'll see how it goes, but doing all right.
How are your teaching skills? Did you have to do some online teaching?
Luckily, my wife's a teacher, so she came home and she had to work during it. Actually, she works at the school. She's not really a teacher, but she taught for however many years. And anyway, she was able to kind of get all that stuff done, and they did very well, actually. My kids adapted to it pretty quickly.
Good deal. Well, Bob, let's talk a little bit about, obviously we're in a crazy world right now, and usually this is a fun time of the year. We're getting geared up for Friday Night Lights or whatever they call it these days. All these kids coming to camps. Can't do any of that.
Right.
What are you hearing out there? Everybody hears different things. What are the chances we play college football this year?
Yeah, I think it's going to get played. I guess the closer we get and we see the numbers, especially in this state, creep up again, that kind of scares you. But I think they're going to throttle things back with, they're already closed the bars and stuff like that, which are probably a big part of it, of the current spread. And so I do think we're going to have some form of it. I am thinking less and less likely that there will be fans in the stands. And if so, very few fans in the stands. So, maybe family and I don't know, maybe cut it really short. I just have a hard problem seeing, them putting 60, 80,000 people. Gotten a little tiny debate on the website about, people are ready to get back and fill that thing. I think there's going to be a lot of people not ready to do it. I think they're going to be slow to kind of get in those big crowds and do all that and that kind of thing. So I think that's something they got to think about too. I personally don't think there's going to be full crowds, but I do think at this point right now that there will be a season.
Yeah, because I know this sounds terrible because there's bigger problems out there, but in order for a lot of not just athletic programs to survive, institutions around the country may not make it if college football is not played. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I do. It's just the money flow of all the money flow is such a big thing. The vendors that work the places, all the stuff that's sold and that stuff, if my scenario doesn't happen, all that stuff's going to be by the wayside anyway. But, at least, I think I think the TV will do better, honestly, because people haven't had anything for so long. No sports, and they're finally starting to do golf, and they're doing, and NASCAR and stuff like that. But it's so little. I just think people are raring just to see something, maybe to even get their mind off it a little bit. It's not like TV is going to pay anymore this year because of it, and they're going to have more people watching. But I think they will do well with this, and it'll be a unique thing. It'll be something we look back on, I think, if these games are played to no crowds and say what a really different thing it is. Well, when you go back and watch these games when it happens.
We're speaking with Bob Redman on the Titan Emory hotline. You can follow him on Twitter at @BobRedman_247. Bob, let's talk a little bit about recruiting. Obviously, there are no real visits. It's all virtual. But the Gators in the last couple of weeks have really had some, quote, kids commit to them. Talk a little bit about those kids.
Yeah, all in the secondary. So they're really getting their secondary needs taken care of. I think there's one or two more spots left for them to fill. But, they've done a good job last year and now so far this year of doing that. And in the last 10 days or so, they added, first of all, Dakota Mitchell, who was a LSU decommitment and from Winter Park, Florida. And a 3-star safety from Winter Park, and a guy that was already committed to LSU. They added him. Then they added safety Kamar Wilcoxon, who actually was the third time now he's been committed to Florida. He decommitted once, recommitted, then decommitted again, and then he committed to Tennessee, and now he just decommitted from Tennessee and is back in the Florida fold. We'll have to see how that one goes moving forward. But he's a 4-star kid out of Georgia that is actually at IMG Academy. Florida hasn't done well at IMG, maybe the most talented program in all of the country. It's a little bit different recruiting there because the kids come from everywhere. They come from California, everywhere. And honestly, most of those kids go back kind of to where they came from. Kamara is from Georgia, and he's going to IMG, but he's already been a Gator 3 times now. So, again, we'll have to see how that goes. And then 3-star cornerback Jordan Young out of Tampa. They like him. He's got good size at 6'0". They like those tall corners, and he fits right into what they're trying to do.
Refresh your vehicle and your brand with a vehicle wrap from Wrap Spot. June is your lucky month at Wrap Spot. Mention promo code Shane and receive 13% off your vehicle wrap. Visit them at wrapspot.com today. Bob, let's talk a little bit about the transfer portal. Obviously, Florida's had some really good success since Dan Mullen has taken over here. You had the Van Jefferson, you had Bernard. I'm sure there's some guys I'm leaving out. Trayvon Grimes.
Yep.
We got some kids that Lingard and a couple other ones that I'm not sure if they're eligible to play right away. But I want to say, is that something that you think this staff really looks at and wants to add those really good players in the transfer portal?
Yeah, I think especially early on when you make a coaching change, there's a lot of you end up losing a lot of players that, it's not a good fit. It's probably a mutual agreement there. So you end up having holes in the roster. And I think they've done a great job of filling those holes. They brought in Grimes and Jefferson, and those guys played right away and did big things for Florida. Adam Schuler was another one that they got and plugged right in and started for 2 seasons with the Gators. So they've done very well. I think if they had their druthers, once they fill the holes that they've gotten, they've done a really good job now of kind of filling those holes. I think if they had their druthers, you'd fill all those spots with young guys. Now there's going to be a year where maybe you just lose a ton of DBs because they all go pro or whatever happens, and you got to do it again. But I think they'd rather have the young guys and then, let them mature within the system. But I think in a new program, which starting to not be, you're starting to get to the point where you can't say that anymore. I think this transfer portal has been a wonderful thing for Florida and Mullen. I wrote yesterday and just tweeted it out. I really don't think anybody has done it as well as he has, and they have actually at the portal. So they've gotten 4 or 5-star kids out of it in 3 years. So that's not a bad haul as long as those guys play. Now, I say they've been 4 for 4 so far because the 4 guys that have been eligible to play all played and played a lot. And some are in the NFL now and doing their thing. Now we got to see how this next group goes and how much they add to the roster and do their thing.
Yeah. Bob, so let's jump forward and say we are going to play football. A lot of the publications have come out now, and that's when a lot of people get excited about college football. But Florida, in some of those, whether it's Lindy's, Athlon's, I can't remember, top 5, some people think Florida can sneak into the 14 playoff. I'm one of those because of the way the schedule lines up this year. I think a lot of people forget about that. Clemson's a very good football team. They play in a weak conference, but their schedule allows them, you can pretty much pencil them in every year. Your thoughts on Florida, what needs to happen, and we're probably in agreement, got to win the game in Jacksonville, and we're jumping ahead of ourselves here. But that's the big game on Florida's schedule this year.
Well, that, and if you're talking playoffs, Atlanta as well, of course. So it's probably Georgia and Alabama. Those are the 2 teams right now that most people have. And yeah, a lot of publications are picking Florida to beat Georgia this year. I think it has to do with quarterback turnover there, and then Trask has done so well, and he's doing his thing, and that Mullen has got it cranking. I think Mullen and this staff going to 2 straight New Year's Six bowls has really, given the program a lift in the eyes of people that do the polls and stuff like that. So all those are big, but yeah, it comes down to Georgia and Alabama. Sure, there's a trick here or 2 that can happen. I just did something last night in the top 5 teams on the schedule. And when you're talking, the mess that Florida State has been, and they're like number 5 this year on the schedule for, if you just take the averages of the polls and stuff. And I think they're actually going to be pretty decent. but I think they're also going to be behind the 8 ball because of new systems and not having a spring and all that jazz. But my point is, Florida State was probably 7 or 8 last year on the schedule, and now they're moved up to 5. And I agree. I think the schedule sets up prime for them, and I think Florida's got experience all across the roster. And you should have a better offensive line with 4 starters returning, and then the kid from Mississippi State, Stuart Reese, joining the mix, who was a starter for them in the past at Mississippi State. So I think things are setting up really well to meet up with Alabama in Atlanta, and then there you go. That's they of course have to get past Georgia, but I think a lot of people are pointing right past that game to get to Atlanta.
Yeah, we're speaking with Hollywood Bob Redman on the Titan MR hotline. You can follow him on Twitter at @BobRedman_247. He's your Swamp 247 guy. Bob, so right now on this Monday, which I believe is June 29th, what is your biggest concern for this Florida football team?
Let's see. I think I honestly, we talked about the offensive line returning. I think they have to prove themselves. Florida has to run the ball better to take those extra steps. Last year, they ran it okay. They ended up with like a 4.2 yards per carry average. But the year before they were averaging 5.2. So that's a big drop off, 1 yard per carry average. So I think they have to do that. And I think part of that is utilizing Emory Jones in the running game. But I think that offensive line, to me, still is the biggest thing. I think, you talk about the loss of David Reese at linebacker, but they really have some talent. I mean, Florida is about to be as talented as they have ever been at linebacker, in my opinion, at least since I've been watching or following. They're not there yet because the kids are kind of young, but the guys coming in, you just had a 5-star in Wingo come in the last class who will be suited up this fall. They are really recruiting well at linebacker. So I think that position will be fine this year, even without Reese. And I think the edge guys are going to be just as good off the edge. D tackles are pretty much all back. Schuler's gone; he was a starter, but they all of a sudden got added a lot of really talented youth there too. So I think they have experience and talent across a roster right now, and I think it's at a point where you feel really comfortable with it, and the offensive line is still the key for me because they haven't made that jump yet.
Let's talk about Kyle Trask. Yep. I really believe if, Joe Burrow doesn't have the year he had last year, which in my opinion might be the best year I've ever seen of a college quarterback.
Yeah.
Kyle Trask would have probably been the talk of, especially the SEC. You've been covering the Gators for a long time. Have you ever seen a guy do what he did who had no experience at all?
No, honestly. And I've watched a lot of practices, even over the last, I don't have the golden key to get into practice like you do, Shane, but practices that I saw, in the last 3 years, I thought Felipe was the better guy just watching him. I mean, I think, I think my mindset is, the athletic ability, the ability to run and that kind of thing, you can see that more with him. And so I really was surprised myself about how well he did. And not that I didn't think he was that he wasn't talented. I just didn't think he had that in him. And man, he just surprised me. And I think he should have been the talk. You can't take anything for Burrow, of course. I mean, like you said, probably the best year of maybe any quarterback ever in college football. But Trask was a crazy good story. I'm interested to see now with 9 starts under his belt, 8 start. I think it was 8 starts, and then he basically won the Kentucky game. So I think with all that experience and heading into an off season where you have to hope and expect he kind of takes charge of the guys, I think that's a way for him to grow that we haven't seen yet, and I expect him to take a big step forward.
Yeah, I saw him a couple of weeks ago, and the one thing I would say to him going after the season was, you work on your feet. Sometimes his feet, they're a little heavy, but he looks like he's lost a little bit of weight. Looks like he's trained a little bit better. I'm
Yeah.
anxious to see what he does this year. Let's stay with the quarterbacks real quick.
Uh-huh.
Let's talk a little bit about Emory Jones, what you
Yep.
like about him. And then I think out of all the quarterbacks that Dan Mullen has signed, he's only been here, 2 or 3 years? This is going into year 3. Anthony Richardson fits what Dan Mullen wants in a quarterback. He's got the size, he's got the arm, he's got tremendous running ability. He's very raw, though.
Yeah.
He's coming from an offense that was very vanilla, I should say.
Yeah.
But I think he's the one guy of all the quarterbacks that Mullen has coached so far here at Florida that is the perfect fit. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think Emory's close, but I think Anthony is bigger, and so he's more Tebow-like, if you will. I mean, he just is, and I think Tebow was raw as a thrower when he came in, and I think they certainly helped him as well. So, yeah, I agree. I mean, I really like Emory, and I really hope that they use Emory a lot this year, knowing that. I think Trask is the guy, and Trask can have a big year. I just think the difference in running ability and Trask is willing to run. It's not the willingness to do it, but the ability to make plays with his feet and them to actually call plays for him to do it. I think that opens things up, and Emory showed me his arm. But sure, Richardson is really talented, and that size is something that is different. And I watched him a couple of years ago. And I can remember this on Twitter because I didn't see him for like a whole year, and then all of a sudden he posted pictures of himself, or somebody else did, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, that's the same guy!" Because he was really skinny. I mean, he wasn't built like he came a year later and he was stacked. So yeah, I think you're right. I think Anthony, I think it sets up really well. By the way, I think Emory's going to play more this year. Trask is the guy. He's going to get the bulk of the reps on the field. I think Emory's going to get his thing, and then Emory takes over. And who knows how long he's going to last as far as sticking around and depending on how well he does. But then you have the time to groom Anthony Richardson. You can get him on the field a little bit at a time. And like you said, he's raw. That gives you that time to build that. Back in the day, that's how they used to do the quarterbacks. And you just don't have that luxury anymore because kids want to play. And I get that.
Yeah. Last thing for you, Bob, and
Yep.
like I said, you've been covering the Gators for a long time, and I'm going to put you on the spot here. Just popped in my head. Out of all the teams that you've seen here, and we'll just go with the 3 national title teams.
Okay.
96, 06, and 08. In your mind, which one's the best team?
96, 06, and 08.
And there's probably a couple of teams that are better than those that didn't win a national title, but we're just going to go with one of those 3.
I think I'm going to go 08.
08.
That you know why? And the offense with Tebow and Percy and all those guys were awesome. But remember Oklahoma coming into that national title game was scoring 60 points a game for like 5 games in a row. And then they held them to 14 points in the Orange Bowl. I mean, that to me was a huge story, and it didn't get overlooked at the time, but I think over time it's gotten overlooked because you think of the offensive stars back then. Plus, I mean, golly, look at some of the guys on that. I think it's 08. I'm actually torn between 08 and 96, but I'll go with 08 because 06. Go ahead.
It's interesting because, that I want to say, wasn't the final score of the OU national title game 24-14?
Yeah, 24-14.
Yeah.
They
we've been scoring, averaging like 50-something points a game, and we didn't play
That's
great.
true.
I shouldn't say didn't play great offensively. It was supposed to be a shootout, and it turned into a defensive battle.
Yeah, but Florida also had been rolling with a lot of points, going to know to that point, not 60 a game, but a lot. And I agree with you. I personally have I'm of the mindset any team that's west of the Mississippi doesn't play defense. I mean, it's just the way college football has gone. I mean, the Big 12, every game ridiculous, and the Pac-12 is the same. So if you're west of the Mississippi and not in the Southeastern Conference, I just don't think they play defense over there. So And it goes back that far. So, anyway, and what was I going to, the '06 team, that defense might have been the best defense, quite honestly. But remember, one of the stats I throw out every once in a while is that '06 offense scored 22 points a game in SEC play in the regular season. 22.
Wow.
They won all those games.
Well, you think about the biggest play of the year.
Yeah.
Was the bad South Carolina team and the head ball coach of the block field goal.
Yeah.
We've had some great teams here, no question about it.
No doubt.
Well, Bob, let everybody know how they can check out all your work online and on Twitter and all that stuff.
Well, we're at swamp247.com. We have 3 full-timers there, myself and Thomas Goldcamp and Blake Alderman. We cover all Gator football, basketball, baseball, and recruiting for all 3 sports. And it's all we do. I mean, this is all we do all the time. We're going to probably add somebody else in the fall, so we're going to have even more coverage. And right now, actually, if you get an annual subscription, it's 50% off. So they're running that deal through the end of the month, and it's a very good deal to take advantage of.
And on Twitter, give them your Twitter handle.
Yeah, it's Bob Redman _247. That's it. Sorry.
All right, good stuff, Bob. It's Hollywood Bob, as we know him.
Yeah.
And we appreciate you taking the time on this Monday morning for joining the show, buddy.
All right, Shane. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's Bob Redman talking Gator recruiting. We're going to take our final time out of the program here. You've been watching and listening to Pot Up with Matthews in the Morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. We'll be right back.
Time out! Time out! Hey! Time out! Time out! Time out! There we go. Good.
We want to take this moment to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills.
Let's give them something to cheer for now.
Our gridiron sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Titan MRI, Gainesville's only locally owned and operated MRI facility. The Best Restoration, Masters of Disasters. Meldon Law, where you matter most. Peachland Dental, Gator fans' first choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte.
Bob in trouble, gets rid of the ball. Big hit.
Our touchdown sponsors are Campus USA Credit Union, Celebration Point Town Center, The Digital Mortgage Guy, Adams Ribs, Gator Dominoes, Celebrate Primary Care, Center State Bank, Gator Bait Media, Davis Gainesville Chevrolet, Miapa Latin Cafe, Gators Dockside, Aikido America Martial Arts and After School,
Doreen Weeby Realtor, Caldwell Banker MM Parish,
Radware, Wrap Spot,
and Style Cuts.
If you are interested in promoting your business on this show, you can visit our website, potupwithshane.com, and click on the Advertise button or call Freddie at 352-284-3733. Again, thank you for all the great businesses that support the show. Please remember, if you like what we are doing here, thank our sponsors and support the businesses that support us.
He's looking, still looking. He's going for the end zone. He's got a touchdown!
Welcome back to this Monday edition of Pot Up with Matthews in the Morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. Large enough to serve you, small enough to care. I really want to thank Coach Kevin O'Sullivan, the head baseball coach of your Florida Gators, for joining us, and Hollywood Bob Redman from Swamp 247 Sports, talking Gator recruiting. Hey, this day in sports is brought to you by the Best Restoration. Do you have COVID-19 concerns? Do what everyone is doing and hire the Best Restoration to fully sanitize and sterilize your home or office. Visit their offices this week for a free bottle of hand sanitizer when you mention the code SHANE. Call them at 352-234-8994. This day in sports, back in 1992, the NHL, the National Hockey League, decides on Eric Lindros. He went to the Philadelphia Flyers instead of the New York Rangers. Make sure you go and tell all your friends to follow us on Facebook Live. You can check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. On tomorrow's show, a Tuesday edition, we're going to have former Jaguar quarterback Mark Brunell, played 19 years professionally in the NFL. He's been a high school coach over in the Jacksonville area the last few years. We'll get caught up with him. Also, it's Tuesday, so that means Buddy Martin from the Buddy Martin Show will join us as well. Wednesday, Drew Copeland from Sister Hazel will join us along with JC. JC will be back in the saddle. And then on Thursday, Nathan Whitaker, author, who wrote Tony Dungy's books. He's written a couple other books. Played for Coach Spurrier at Duke, and Terry Norvell from College Sports Today over in Jacksonville will join us. And then we're going to wrap up the week with former Gator Noah Brandeis, who was a walk-on quarterback here. Was part of that great victory against FSU in the Swamp. And we're going to have our buddy Ben Garrett, who writes for the Ole Miss Spirit in Mississippi, talk a little bit about Lane Kiffin and what's going on in the state of Mississippi. They now have a new state flag. But that's going to be it for today's show, folks. It's a wrap, brought to you by WrapSpot. A vehicle wrap from WrapSpot will give your business years of brand recognition and increased sales. Call WrapSpot today. Stay safe out there, folks. Make sure you tune in and follow us. Have a great day. See you tomorrow. Take care.